The missing counterpart of Kundalini, the descending dove. By Trevor McGrath. As many know by now, there is an ascending serpent energy we call Kundalini. But what if I said this energy was only half of a larger picture? There is a secondary embodiment path that is complementary to the Kundalini energy. There is the path of the descending dove. Humanity has largely inherited the notion that up is good and down is bad. So much so, that we have conflated the idea of Gurdjieff's concept of the Kundabuffer with this descending energy. We are taught that hell is below our feet and heaven is above us, when truly, all is within us, and all around us. Energy that descends is often related to fallen angels, or what some call demons. But what if demons are just angels wearing scary masks? We'll cover that more later in this video. But back to the descending dove. Energy that is descending comes from the celestial plane, hence why we perceive it as coming down. Whereas energy that ascends or raises up comes from the earth, such as the Kundalini energy rising up the spine from the primordial root. Through this perspective alone, descending energy doesn't seem so bad anymore. It comes from heaven to earth, as God's gift to the world. There is a story in Greek mythology about a serpent rising from a cup known as the bowl of Hygeia. On the other hand, there is a commonly known symbol in certain Gnostic circles of a dove flying headfirst downward into a grail cup. For key reasons, which I will cover later on, this descending dove isn't really seen or taught as a path of spiritual embodiment. This descent is the significant other to the Kundalini system. The dove is the missing feminine path that grounds the charged-up masculine path. Though everything has a mix of both polarities, the Kundalini system, though important, is a masculine system. The dove descending into the Grail cup is known to symbolize purity, peace, and divine grace. Perhaps you've noticed that even in the spiritual community many of us are very projective and still driven by an inflamed ego, even though we've activated all chakras and ascended our energy upwards. This is because many have seen the top as the end goal to enlightenment, therefore seeing the path as a system based on hierarchy. We have trapped ourselves in the head as a means of being at the highest ascension point. As a result, we have ironically fallen back into models of thought regarding superiority, whether it be superiority based on blood types, affiliations, beliefs, or experiences. The result of Kundalini dominance has many of us identifying most strongly with everything other than the unified trait of spirit which we all have equally, therefore debate and war wage on, as we have simply repackaged then reused the same superiority complexes the tyrants and dictators of the past were driven by. This linear and superiority-based model of spiritual ascension reminds me of the Tower of Babylon. How they tried to build a tower high enough to reach heaven, and how Babylon divided mankind through the use of words and language. It also reminds me of the story of Icarus, how he flew upwards through the sky to reach the sun, only to come tumbling down from his starry-eyed and grandiose attempt. Mind you, the story of Icarus is essentially the story of Lucifer. This idea of choosing the upward polarity over the other is also the same in the story of Adam and Eve. The serpent, or ascending energy, tempted Eve to eat the fruit from the tree of knowledge, which can be seen as the sympathetic nervous system. This caused them to fall from Eden. Thus marks the transition from the light body to the carbon-based material body. This model of reaching the top and staying there has been expressed in many stories. It is when we return back down and complete the circuit that we transcend this narcissistic nature of the modern human condition. It is when we metaphorically bow, so to speak, or humble our head downwards to be level with our heart, that we complete the circuit and become whole. Humility is far more evolutionary than knowledge could ever be. Knowledge can be diluted by duality-based interpretation, but humility is inevitably a pure form of spiritual refinement. In certain traditions and circles, it was the practice of washing the feet of the homeless that acted as one of the most rudimentary initiations due to the fact that it was an act of humility and charity all at once. In some lines of the Knights Templar, the Grand Master was made to practice washing the feet of the homeless to ensure he kept the very humility that kept him from turning ego-driven, condescending or tyrannical. In the book of John, Jesus washed the feet of the disciples. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus replied, "You do not realize now what I am doing, but later you will understand." "No," said Peter, "you shall never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me." "Then, Lord," Simon Peter replied, "not just my feet but my hands and my head as well." Jesus answered, "Those who have had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean. And you are clean, though not every one of you." For he knew who was going to betray him, and that was why he said not everyone was clean. There's also a part in the Bible where Mary Magdalene washed Jesus' feet with her tears, dried them with her hair, and anointed them with perfume. Though the core of this continuous foot-washing symbolism portrays the evolutionary energy of humility, there is something very literal about this that relates to the descending dove. The feet are the point of contact which grounds us to the earth along with the perineum. This grounding or discharging energy is the descending energy. Perhaps you might wonder why you feel ungrounded no matter how much you work on mending your root chakra. If so, here's some food for thought. If we are only working with our chakras with an ascending linear model in mind, energy will mainly charge upwards instead of discharging downwards. If our energy isn't discharging downwards just as much as it is charging upwards, then we will feel ungrounded until we reconcile the balance between directions. This upwards and downwards energy can be seen as one orbit instead of two polar energies in competition. In Taoism, this circuit is known as Shao Zhou Tian, which translates as small heavenly circuit, otherwise known as the microcosmic orbit. Can you see how this orbit, or circuit, is hindered by using only the linear model of Kundalini without a counterpart? Without this orbit or circulation, we remain trapped in the head, where we only see life through the lens of fear, resistance, separation, and duality. This linear model has us arguing over small nuances, such as whether the flower of life or the lotus of life are the proper symbol, instead of realizing that all geometry is divine in its own way, and that both life and death are best friends who go golfing with each other on the weekends. The dualistic lens has us addicted to choosing one side of something while debunking the other side. We then become warmongers, and in a childlike and generally innocent way, tyrants, when we center all of our energy in the crown as if we are the only ones to be crowned in the higher energies. Delusion, God complexes, and even varying shades of mania and schizophrenia can take place when we see the highest energies as the end of the road and have no plan on circulating it back down to Mother Earth. This is a form of spiritual greed that perhaps we've all fallen into. where we feel like we can milk the stars above without sharing with Mother Earth below. The descending dove is married to the ascending Kundalini serpent. This descending energy literally makes us down to earth and able to truly feel other beings as they are, instead of projecting ego-based assumptions for the sake of obtaining some sort of ego boost or self-fulfillment. This is why we say someone who feels us and is grounded is down to earth. There's a saying that is very fitting to this concept. It goes, "Don't be so heavenly minded that you're no earthly good." To expound further on the idea of the ascending serpent and the descending dove, there is a verse in the book of Matthew that reads, "Behold, I am sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves, so be wise as serpents and innocent as doves." In this verse we see it expressed that the serpent resembles perseverance, knowledge, and wisdom, whereas the dove resembles purity, refinement, and grace. The serpent resembles the tree of knowledge, and the dove resembles the tree of life. Since the nervous system resembles a tree, we could say the serpent resembles the sympathetic nervous system, which is geared towards action, exertion, the fight or flight system and charging mode, and the dove symbolizes the parasympathetic nervous system, which is geared towards regeneration, healing, our rest and digest system, and is our discharging mode. The book of Matthew describes the Spirit of God coming down like a dove. The book of Numbers describes how Moses raised a bronze serpent on a pole. So if the ascending current of this circuit is the serpent and the descending current is the dove, then we must ask, what symbolizes the blending between a bird and a serpent? Perhaps a dragon. Perhaps a dragon is one who has the ascending and descending energy in perfect balance. While the strictly hierarchical model of spiritual practice has us correlating the dragon with a supreme blood type and certain bloodlines, there is a more unifying and empowering view to what the dragon is that applies to every being throughout all of creation. The Grail is a remedy, not a dividing line. Though there were certain lineages of particular relevance, their relevance was deemed mainly by the fact that they were preserving the alchemical and transformative practices of balancing one's energetic field, along with certain relics and texts that symbolized and described this concept. The Holy Grail has the dove descending into it. It is the feminine healing quality of grace forged by humility. It is the divine descent. The Ark of the Covenant in some schools of thought stored the brazen serpent staff, and is the masculine charging quality of activation, triumph, and radiance. The Ark had other relevant things in it such as manna or monoatomic gold and other items, but that topic would have to be a whole video of its own. The six-pointed star has gotten quite a bad reputation these days due to the overgeneralization of Judaism and other misconceptions which are quite understandable given the convoluted nature of such a topic at this point. However, the six-pointed star, which goes by many names, is a symbol that consists of a triangle facing up, interlocking with a triangle facing down. This symbol is the most rudimentary star-shaped expression of the alchemical adage, as above, so below, and turns the idea of the ascending serpent and descending dove into a very basic depiction. In Grail lore, this idea corresponds to the sword and the cup. Let's expand on this idea of the sword and the cup. The sword is the masculine tool of triumph and action, the phallic symbol or male part. The cup is the feminine container of grace and healing, the uterus, pelvic bowl or feminine part. These are multidimensional allegories and can be seen all throughout the body, in nature, and symbolized in geometry and in the form of relics and so on. The ways in which this concept or energetic principle can be expressed has no limits. A former Grand Master of the Priory of Sion known as Leonardo da Vinci is an ode to the fact that this energetic principle of polarity is an inexhaustible expression that inherently fuels any benevolent revolution or renaissance. The rise and the fall is an innate part of all things. Such is life. Such is the very thing that creates all things, frequency and vibration. Frequency is expressed as a waveform, rising and falling equally above and below a median line. Chivalry is a masculine expression of a feminine trait, the trait of grace. In a chivalric view, a sword pointing upwards symbolizes war. A sword pointing downwards symbolizes peace. In terms of Templar-based geomancy and earth-grid work, the sword pointing up is an upshoot of energy and the sword pointing down is a downshoot of energy. Obelisks are phallic, or masculine energy, and pyramids are wombs, or feminine energy. Obelisks and pyramids would be placed on upshoots and downshoots accordingly. The sword pointing upwards was a symbol of war or action, and in modern terminology we can see this as the fight-or-flight system of the parasympathetic nervous system, with the sword pointing down being the peaceful grace of the rest and self-healing system. Kundalini, though having Shashumna, the Ida, and Pingala or Shakti and Shiva polarity, is inherently masculine as a whole. It is the projection, the spark, or the initiator into spiritual awakening which shoots the serpentine fire throughout the body, burning down all blockages over time. This is necessary warlike energy for the sake of alchemical transmutation. This is the volatile ingredient, or the dissonance that breaks up and disrupts the old programming. The descending dove is inherently feminine as a system. It is the Shekinah or Holy Spirit which comes in the form of grace to soothe and mend the areas Kundalini has left in its wake. This descending feminine energy returns the stale charge of broken blockages back downwards to the earth. Our discharge is Earth's food, and trauma is no different than pleasure when it comes to her diet, as the earth is an alchemist as well. To ground the excess energy down and out isn't to plague the earth with our pain and waste, it's simply a component of a natural process. Though there are many teachings relating both Shakti and Shiva to Kundalini, perhaps you might want to ponder the idea of Kundalini being Shiva, the destroyer, and the descending energy being Shakti, the energy of creation. It's worth pointing out that the word Shakti is phonetically similar to the word Shekinah. Shekinah is a Hebrew word that means settling, as in resting, alluding to the downward or descending energy. To further validate the Shekinah symbolizing the descending energy, it was specifically seen as God's presence in the world, here on earth. Thus, it was an energy that descended. And in Jewish mysticism, the Shekinah is symbolized as a dove, corresponding to Christian Gnostic depictions of the dove as the Holy Spirit. When you feel the dove, or the Shekinah Holy Spirit in the body, it is often felt as a cool breeze of sorts, felt within and not solely on the surface of the skin. This cool breeze ensures the Kundalini fire can burn without burning the whole house down. As you may sense, my emphasis in this video is the fact that balance is key. Now, with balance in mind, I'd like to cover the concept of the Anunnaki and the potential false dichotomy between Enki and Enlil, as it relates to the serpent and the dove in quite a fascinating way. In certain cultures, Enki was depicted as a serpent and Enlil was depicted as a bird, usually an eagle but a bird nonetheless. The eagle swoops downwards to catch its prey, making it fit the idea of the descending energy. Many schools of thought offer the idea that Enki and Enlil is a literal good guy versus bad guy story. However, I see the war between them also being an internal allegory. It could be seen that Enki is the Kundalini or ascending energy, and Enlil is the descending avian energy. These two being at war could be seen as our own decision to choose one polarity over the other, causing us to never become whole as we are favoring one polarity of self while casting out the other polarity. That would make us the warmongers. Instead of reconciling both into one concept and creating harmony between opposites, we chose to fall into density via dualistic perception, the illusion of separation. This is perhaps the allegorical meaning of Enki creating the densified human body type. We chose the serpent, Enki, and casted out the other, causing us to create ourselves in a more densified form due to the act of seeing life through the dualistic lens of separation. It's said in biblical text that a third of the angels were cast down, implying that 2/3 of the angels stayed ascended or ascending upwards. Could this mean that we were once in a light body and through free will, turned into carbon-based flesh because we chose a model that caused only 1/3 of our energy to descend? Is this why it's now a part of the human condition to be ungrounded and overly cerebral? With that being said, what is an angel? What is a demon? It is fair to say that they are aspects of ourselves, but there is much more to this concept that really helps integrate the fact that everything really is working in our favor at the end of the day, no matter how scary the illusion of division may seem. What if angels and demons are made of the same light, like we all are? What if the only thing that differentiates an angel from a demon is the direction they are headed? They are all different angels or angles. Both are made of light, it's just that one is ascending and the other is descending. Despite the polarity, it is all an angle of light, or a contrasted perspective of the mental realm, we could say. We assume the ascended angels to be the true light and the fallen angels to be the false light. But what if the corruption we blame on the supposed evil in the spiritual realms is really just the evil that humanity is responsible for? What if the evils brought about by humanity stem solely from this dualistic perception we hold, where we choose one team and condemn the other out of self-righteous indignation? What if the only evil that exists is our own fear of evil? This would align with the old saying, the only thing to fear is fear itself. No evil can dwell in our being or temple when we reconcile this dichotomy and allow the polar opposite currents within ourselves, or their angels and demons, to be at peace with one another instead of one trying to kill off or end the other. Now, this is not to say we should worship or call upon demons, but if we were to change our perception of what a demon actually is, then we would leave no room for our own evils to spill out, given it would call for us to take responsibility of the state of the world instead of scapegoating it all onto goats with pitchforks or the Saturn cube matrix. Saturn rules Capricorn. This is literally the scapegoat. Baphomet is a scapegoat. The term scapegoat comes from the old practice of people casting their sins onto an innocent goat before sacrificing it. Yet we have come to see everything regarding the goat as evil. In some schools of thought, demon meant guardian or knowledge, and according to some it meant both, implying guardian of knowledge. Such as the gargoyle, guarding the mysteries of the cathedrals, so the judgmental folks who judge things by how they look remain far away from obtaining the deeper mysteries. If you think about it, Only those who are choosing to see things dualistically and at war are those who would judge a book by its cover and run away from a scary face. So the demon acts as the perfect filter to keep the deeper mysteries out of the hands of those who would use it dualistically for self-gain or self-righteous pursuits. Do you see how that works? In fact, demons are guardian angels. That is why they look intimidating and aren't necessarily nice, because they're there to keep you alive on the earth plane in order to fulfill your purpose here. Whether it be blocking you from certain realizations you aren't ready for, or throwing objects at you in the form of a poltergeist yelling, "Get out!" Given the fact that a demon is a descended angel, it can actually accompany you here in this density and directly affect the material world, whereas the other 2/3 of the angels can guide us from the higher planes and affect the material world still, but more indirectly. There is a demon acting as a guardian to our internal grail. When we are ready to set aside our dualistic or ego-driven perspective, the demon will take off its mask and show it was an angel all along, and will guide you to the deeper states of your own being. This is what the demon statue at the Church of Mary Magdalene in Rennes Chateau symbolizes. That statue is supposed to be Asmodeus, the king of all demons, the destroyer, just as Kundalini is the destroyer of blockages and illusions. Just as Shiva was known in Vedic teachings as the destroyer of all that no longer serves us. Earth energy pulls energy out of beings for the sake of helping them discharge, which later was interpreted as malevolent siphoning. If all siphoning of energy is malevolent, then we shouldn't have cats as pets, given cats help us get rid of or discharge built-up energy that is stagnating our biofield. The initial intent in the spiritual plane to pull energy away from something is not to steal or to cause harm, but we as humans have the free will to siphon other people's energy for self-centered intentions. To reframe this concept of demons, it could generally be seen that the demon or guardian angel carries out the task of keeping you away from places or thoughts you might not be ready for. Or we could say, to keep us clear of having certain key revelations prematurely or at the wrong time, which would cause us to enter a state of psychosis or perhaps even suicidality. In computer terminology, a demon is a program that runs in the background. This is a metaphor for something that runs in our subconscious mind that we may not be too aware. This computer demon only awakens to carry out periodic tasks commanded by the CPU. The CPU in this analogy would be metaphorical for the source or God. We are under the impression that it would be the devil that would command the demonic realm, but the devil is still a demon, therefore the devil still takes orders from the source or God, given that is the only thing that can give orders or life when we boil it all down. So with all of this being said, you might wonder, what is the deal with demonic possession? How is there a silver lining in that? For starters, it might be worth looking into the original Greek root of the word exorcism. Demonic possession is a hijacking, but what ends up happening is the one who is possessed to the point where they're regulated upon is oftentimes bedridden by the ill effects, or even restrained. Either way, they are often completely immobilized or subdued at some point in the progression. This is an extreme approach to keep someone still or away from doing something they shouldn't, or perhaps to keep them from going somewhere they shouldn't. It's a last-ditch effort to hinder someone for the sake of them not stepping so drastically off their path. Think of it like this. What good is it when your car breaks down on the side of the road? Perhaps you'll be late to where you're going, which seems unfortunate, but for all you know, this seemingly unfortunate event could be the very thing that made it to where you didn't cause a 10-car pileup. Timing is everything, and truly everything is inevitably divine timing. Everything is working for us, even when it appears to be working against us. I remember as a teenager growing up in Washington State, I went to a place called Devil's Tower. It was an old, dilapidated concrete mill with no trespassing signs all around it, and was said to be haunted. To make a long story short, I was about to walk into the bottom section of this mill when I heard a very deep growl. There's no animal in the woods of Washington, or perhaps anywhere, that could growl this deep. Not only that, the growl was completely in my head. It wasn't local to a direction in the outside world. It came through as a clear, clairaudient warning. My friend heard the growl as well, and I watched his light brown complexion turn pale while we looked at each other with our chins on the floor. Needless to say, we didn't enter the bottom section of the mill. The thick concrete floor in this place has big gaps where it has fallen through to the bottom where we were going to walk through before hearing the growl. For all we knew, we would have accidentally stirred something up to cause a giant concrete slab of flooring to land on one of us just by walking around down there. But we'll never know if that would have happened because we heard that growl and walked right back the other way. Scary indeed. But evil, perhaps not. Once again, guardian angels aren't meant to be charming. No guardian is really going to be successful if they prioritize charm and kindness over keeping people safe. If you go all the way through hell, you'll find the back door to heaven, because there is no more hell left to experience. You've already been through it all, so the only thing relative to your previous experience in that case could only possibly be a step towards heaven or betterment. That concept is expressed in our anatomy, given the very lowest part of the spine, known as the coccyx, is literally shaped like a grail cup. In other words, there's a chalice at the deepest reaches of your own internal underworld. The grail was said to be carved out of the crown jewel of Lucifer, the fallen angel. This can be seen as the descent from the crown, or crown jewel, down to the underworld or earth, bringing the heavenly energy to the earth plane. Is that not why we're here to some degree? To bring heaven to earth the best we can? Once again comes the saying, don't be so heavenly minded that you're no earthly good. The crown fell down into the cup at the base of the spine. And from the base of the spine it rises again as a slightly more refined energy, up along the Kundalini channels, curving over the top of the head and back down as the descending dove of grace. This is the completion of the circuit. This is the cycle of life and death bent into a state of eternity. This is when we merge the earthly body with eternal nature, and all ailments begin to heal over time. Thus we have the Grail cup filled to the brim with the elixir of life. At this state we've overcome death because we created a circuit out of our energy instead of molding our energy to a linear model where we only go upwards and keep our bodily energy stuck in the head while our soul shoots through the top of the crown, abandoning its presence and mission here. One night I was meditating in my room with all of the lights off. It was almost pitch black, other than the little bit of light coming in through the curtain gap. During this time I was able to get to a state where I could see around the room perfectly, even though my physical eyes were shut. When I opened my eyes, the room seemed even darker and more unclear than when they were shut, but only while I was in this meditative state. I recall opening my eyes and the room looked like it usually did with open eyes. However, there was a dark mass in the top corner of the room on the wall unit. This thing had a blaring presence. It's basically a formless black mass that is darker than a dark room. It doesn't have a face, but it does have a voice and its own language. I had seen it before in my uncle's basement when I woke up in the middle of the night to a television-lit room. But back to this specific encounter. Since I was in a meditative state, my fear mind wasn't really turned on and I felt completely comfortable and compelled to stare into its darkness. Not to welcome it, not to shun it, but to face it, in as neutral of a way as I could. It didn't even move, it just dissolved. It took about 15 seconds, I'd guess, in order for it to disappear. After that happened, I had one of the biggest revelation streaks I've ever had in my life. So much clarity came in those following days, to put it simply. If you look at how Dante depicted the 9 layers of hell in Dante's Inferno, you might find it is often depicted in the shape of a chalice or grail cup. The base of the spine, as previously mentioned, has this exact shape to it. It is where we literally bottom out and break through the height of one polarity into the other polarity. This same concept exists on the opposite end, at the top of the head. The highest height is a direct portal to the lowest low, and the lowest low is a direct portal to the highest height. Remember this when life is challenging you. It is always darkest before dawn. Despite how long the night may be, the sun will surely rise at some point. Just because we go through trials and tribulations doesn't mean we're messing up or doing something wrong. If our idea of karma is dual and linear, then we begin to believe that going through pain, illness, or hard times can only mean we did something wrong, or that we aren't doing something right enough. There is no ultimately righteous way. Even if there was, you could be doing everything right and still go through streaks of what appears to be disorder or misfortune. But truly, all is in order. If we see others going through their streaks and feel we need to correct them or somehow save them, then we aren't really trusting life's natural unfoldment. And sometimes we all wane in and out of that trust, and that fluctuation is also meant to be. Despite how perfect you may think your approach to life may be, there will be rainy days. No rain, no crops. No crops, no life. The sun is beautiful and needed, but look at the desert. We evolve in contrast, not in the sterile illusion of perfection. There will be times where life itself seems like a demon. But remember, a demon is only something that is meant to seem scary and out of order so it can guide us in our timing. There has to be a push and a pull, that's what steers our movement along the path. The give and the take. The up and the down. It's all a matter of buoyancy. Balance keeps us living. If there's too much weight on one side of the ship will roll. Sometimes struggle is the only thing that brings the evolutionary results we need in that moment. We are forged by struggle and gifted by peace. We are activated by the serpent and healed by the dove. Both are polarities of the universal one, i.e., God. Balance is key, but even when we're unbalanced, we're still balancing between being unbalanced and balanced. In a sense, even balance is inevitable. So if someone is having an off day or an ego trip, it's still meant to be. It's meant to be whether or not we trust if it is meant to be. Therefore, there's no such thing as wrong in such a dry sense. There's just certain things that are more preferable than other things. But no matter how much we do or don't prefer something, it doesn't make it wrong. I realize that the concept of demons being guardian angels is not a popular or widely accepted view. I have no expectation for anyone to adopt this view as their truth. If it resonates with you, great. And if not, that's fine as well. I also realize expressing this view may cause many to cast stones at the messenger. But to that I'll say, witch hunts didn't end in the 18th century, they continue in different forms. In the modern form, it's people with social media accounts condemning people who they've never even met in person. This comes back full circle to earlier points made in this video. Humanity has become so dualistic that we have willingly divided ourselves, which makes it all too easy for the tyrants to conquer us completely. They could never dominate the world if it weren't for us dividing ourselves and condemning each other. With that being said, we are our only enemy if we wish to see it in terms of good versus evil. We have done this to ourselves, there is no scapegoat for this. We have all bought into the duality at some point, and likely will in the future because it is now an inherent part of being as dense and physical as we are at this point. But the key is to own that, accept that, and be aware enough to transmute it, knowing it will take time and maintenance. To rewire the human condition is not an overnight process, and just because we are aware or fully understanding of our weaknesses, doesn't mean we have transmuted them. It is best to walk lightly on this path, and to be easy on yourself and others as you progress. Nature tends to unfold rather slowly. If you peel a lotus open, it will die. If you let nature unfold the lotus petals, it will prosper. Pros and cons of the serpent and the dove. Our energy works best for us when it's circulated. It's most ideal to have an even amount of charge and discharge, or a half and half balance. Kundalini is the charge, the dove is the discharge. Too much Kundalini energy results in inflammation. Mental inflammation results in us becoming ego-driven. Ego inflammation results in us becoming emotionally unstable. Mental inflammation results in us becoming physically ill. When we have too much Kundalini energy and not enough dove energy, we begin to yield these forms of inflammation. On the other hand, too much dove energy, or what we can call discharging energy, results in us becoming ill through being drained. Mental drainage results in vacancy of the mind, perhaps a catatonic state being an extreme case. Emotional drainage results in vacancy of the emotions, becoming emotionally void, or cold-hearted. Physical drainage results in physical vacancy, which is death, essentially, when we leave the body altogether. Therefore, too much dove energy results in illness as well, just illness of the opposite pole. In modern Western mysticism, the Kundalini path is not only most emphasized, but is often referred to as the basis of the whole spiritual path, where you rise upwards linearly from the earthly bowels of the root chakra and up through the spiritually enlightened state of the crown chakra. If we continue this trajectory without the grounding energy balancing it, we end up abandoning our down-to-earth nature and true usefulness here on earth. Through this approach, we often become talking heads. What I mean by a talking head is someone who comments endlessly only for the sake of ego-driven fulfillment. Here's a short story describing this concept. There are two prophets. Both speak the exact same prophecy to the people. One touches their hearts, and the other one only touches their logic. What was the difference that caused them to have different impacts if they spoke the exact same prophecy? The difference was in the prophet's intentions as to why they were telling the people. The one who reached their hearts spoke to inform people from a place of love and truth. Therefore they were felt. The one who only spoke to their logic, spoke to correct the people and look intelligent. Therefore they were only thought of. One was driven by the heart, the other was driven by the head. Another way to see it is that one came from a place where energy was balanced and the other came from a place where energy was hoarded up in the highest chakras and wasn't down to earth. A perfect example of this can be found in the Egyptian Book of the Dead. The scales of Ma'at would weigh the heart to determine the measure of a soul, not the brain. This story implies that we pass through to the afterlife based on how we lived, not based on what we knew. Enlightenment or conscious awakening means very little without embodiment and action. The brain thinks, but the heart knows. This is the line between knowledge and gnosis. One is knowledge by way of thinking, and the other is knowledge by way of first-hand experience and intuition. It may, or may not, be the case that an extraterrestrial being, named Enki, created the physical human body. But here's a thought. It may be the case that we chose to only use our serpent energy, or the Enki archetype, causing us to fall from Eden. It's a choice of free will. It would be a cold existence if the human body was only a result of a tyrannical extraterrestrial race splicing DNA to make beings who would mine their gold. Mining gold could be a metaphor for transmuting energy by balancing the serpent and the dove, resulting in the ascended serpent or dragon. Hence the lore behind the dragon guarding gold. It really gets interesting when we look at the whole Anunnaki story as an internal allegory. Now to circle back to the counterpart the world has been missing, the descending dove. The story of Noah mentions the dove returning with the olive branch, a symbol of finding new land. This can be seen as us finding our grounding or footing, which is facilitated by the descending energy of discharge. Think about the metaphor for a second. If we never discharge our energy, then it implies that subconsciously, we are hoarders, of sorts. We might fear to let any of our life force leave us given the illusion of the material world and the misconception of separation being an ultimate reality. However, it is not that we contain a certain amount of energy. We don't just have energy, we are the source of energy altogether. And if our energy is only kept heading towards the head and through the crown chakra, then we will inevitably develop a God complex or an overly cerebral nature at some point. This is not to shame, this is to say that we've all done this to some degree along the path. It's perhaps a necessary step to experience certain extremes of polarity. In knowing both extreme poles, we can easily determine what the center of the poles are, and in doing so, we become aware of the balance that we can potentially embody. One of the biggest scapegoats in the world of symbolism is the Baphomet, a being that clearly displays polarity. It is pointing up with one hand and down with the other. It has certain physical traits of both a man and a woman. It is part beast and part human. It has wings, but is of the earth. And it has the caduceus, or staff of polar serpents raised up to its solar plexus or diaphragm area. One of the most important things to note about the Baphomet is that it bears the term solvic coagula on its arms. This translates to English as dissolve and coagulate, meaning to diffuse, then reassimilate, in a more refined form, to destroy and to rebuild. This concept is a good example of the Kundalini serpent being the destroyer and the descending dove being the healer. The Kundalini gives us our power, the dove gives us our grace. Power without grace turns us into tyrants, be it full-blown dictators or more subtle forms such as manipulators, deceivers, illusionists, or cult leaders. The thing about cults these days is that you don't have to go to a physical location to meet up with them. There are plenty on social media, and most don't recognize they have created a cult due to the fact that they are unconscious of themselves in certain aspects. Nobody is immune to falling into an ego-driven state. Once again, true balance is a matter of maintenance more than it is an ultimate achievement that one obtains and inherently keeps from there on out. But one thing is for certain, the descending energy, or the energy of the dove, can keep us humble and gracious. Sometimes it takes struggle, pain, and even illness for us to obtain the levels of humility and grace needed in order to truly embody our purest self. I say purest self in this case because the term higher self rehashes the idea that up is good and down is bad. We see the dominance of Kundalini or ascending energy all throughout society. Society is largely patriarchal and has been for centuries. Most people, despite their gender or sexual preference, have more masculine energy than feminine energy. Though masculine energy is great for keeping up with the needs and demands of modern-day society, the feminine energy is largely unrecognized, and we see this manifest as global illness and lack of peace. Famine and war are direct results of the world not embodying the feminine energy in balance with the masculine. The practice of grounding, or what we call earthing, is a very simple and natural way to bring about this descending energy of discharge, but for some this doesn't quite cut it, as they may have blockages that keep their energy from going down and out optimally. One thing I find helpful to do is to first determine which blockages you may have and where they are. Once determined, imagine a gentle, cool breeze in that area, and feel it happen with your mind. Make it happen with your will. This cooling energy is the energy signature of the descending current. Once again, it goes by many names, such as the Shekinah, Sophia, or Holy Spirit, though in this video we are referring to it as the dove. The projective, or masculine energy, causes us to leave our body and stay outside of it, which is quite contrary to the idea of spiritual embodiment. You can imagine the feet and the perineum as a triangular magnet that pulls you back into your body, bringing heaven back to earth. This is akin to the Holy Spirit descending into the temple. Speaking of temples, the story of the Knights Templar plays beautifully into this concept. Just as we have to excavate deep within ourselves to find our personal treasures, the Knights Templar excavated beneath the Temple of Jerusalem to find the treasures they were looking for. It would take a video of its own to really cover what those treasures were, so we'll keep that part brief for the sake of preserving focus on the metaphor. The metaphor being, we must excavate or descend into our darker depths in order to find our deepest treasures. These treasures can liberate us from all bondage, suffering, and can transmute all of the evils we have collectively birthed and perpetuated. Remember, evil doesn't predate us. We collectively birthed evil due to our choice to perceive things in duality. We chose to step out of Eden and eat from the sympathetic nervous system, the tree of knowledge. And in saying so, we can figure what the return to Eden would be obtained through. We must come back down from the clouds of self-righteousness and self-proclaimed godliness and humble ourselves, in order to complete the circuit or the microcosmic orbit. I realize we all want to be from the stars, and that we are, but we have an earthly tether to tend to, for the sake of divine alchemy. When we transmute the human condition, instead of abandoning it, we help transmute the generational trauma of humanity instead of keeping it dammed up within our being with no discharge outlet. The end results of this can look like the highest forms of gentleness, grace, and harmonious connection. There's no more room for war, or argument, or judgment when we all strive for this balance. There is no room for greed to exist when we trust that we can discharge energy without worrying about lack. Jerusalem is a state of mind. It is a dimension. Jerusalem translates to place of peace, or city of peace. Either way, peace is implied when we refer to the word Jerusalem. It is much more than a city in the Middle East. We can contrast Jerusalem to Babylon, which is the polar opposite. It is accurate to compare these two states of internal being to this concept of the dove and the serpent. Our only next step to evolving as a species is through grace, humility, and peace. Other than that, there is nowhere left to turn, other than heading back the same direction where we came from: war, ego inflammation, and the illusion of division. There is nothing new under the sun, as the old saying goes. This system referred to here as the dove is not a new invention. It is simply the obvious counterpart to a pre-existing system. And through the path of the dove, or the descending current that balances the ascending, we can embody spirit and bring peace to earth. I realize that this message will not be for everyone. Those who enjoy the idea of spiritual superiority may not enjoy this idea that ascending is not the whole idea, just half of the idea that is meant to circulate. When we bend the linear path into a curve or a circle and allow it to circulate, we create the feminine energy to balance the masculine. This is quite literal, as feminine energy is curved. Though Kundalini is depicted as serpents winding upwards in a curved way, the result of such practice still implies energy only heading in one direction, upwards. Now if I can draw your attention to the screen for a moment. Here is a chart I've created based on a pathway that was shown to me while meditating on the descending energy. After receiving this epiphany, the logic behind it unfolded in the following days and lined right up with everything I knew about how the human body is wired and how our nervous system functions. This same pathway can make coherent alignments in the Gothic cathedrals throughout Europe, given they were built based on the human body. In this practice, you feel your way down from your head to your perineum in a curved pathway, traveling downwards through feeling and mental imagery. Feeling every step of the way, taking it nice and slowly in order to truly pandiculate this connection. This is far different than traveling straight down into the body on a linear path. The curve differentiates the effects quite profoundly. This curved path does have an ascending counterpart, but given the ascending part is already predominant in humanity, we'll put emphasis on the descent. This pathway of emphasis is shown in the picture as the blue path displayed in the figure on the left side. Practicing this is far different than practicing consciousness in the lower areas through an ascending model, because this brings the fruition of the higher energies back down for a refined effect in the lower centers. The first step to this internal mechanism is brought about by the amygdala, or what we can call the Magdalene. This step involves the amygdala relaxing, which causes it to fire forward towards the frontal lobe, causing us to exit fight or flight mode so that we don't bring our fears into our vessel and desecrate the temple. This letting down of the guard is the energy of divine surrender. The second step is to curve back behind the neck, as shown in the chart. When our focus is behind our neck, the tongue tends to relax, which has been known to silence the inner dialogue and stimulate the vagus nerve. This stimulates the release of oxytocin, the love hormone. This also indirectly signals the hypothalamus to release vasopressin, the trust hormone. So now, we have let our guard down by calming the amygdala in the first step, and secondly, we have brought about the energy of trust and love in the second step. The third step curves us forward again, this time around the upper chest for the sake of activating the thymus and the pericardium. In physical terms, this has much to do with our immune system. In occult anatomy, the thymus is said to have 144 akenonic cells, cells that never die. These cells bring the energetic signature of immortality. This immune system activation and protection of the heart which the pericardium performs is needed before we step into the lower realms where our biggest internal demons are. If our heart doesn't weigh lighter than the feather when we travel down to our lower centers, then we will be metaphorically judged on the scales. So this third step ensures that our hearts are lightened from the previous two steps, the first being letting our guard down, and the second being the activation of love and trust. Thus, the third step in the image on your screen, the spiritual immune system, our protection. Not in the sense that our inner demons mean us harm, but more so in the sense that we may harm ourselves in this lower area due to how we choose to interpret this experience. This is why the previous steps came before this, to ensure we would perceive this from a loving and trusting view, and from our heart-based intuitive nature, as opposed to seeing it only through a literal and solarlogical lens. The fourth step curves back again, around the back of the diaphragm. This causes the breath rate to slow down even more than when we started this meditation, as the diaphragm is in more of a parasympathetic or receptive state. This can be seen as a secondary downshift in the breath, causing us to enter the theta brainwave state of the subconscious mind, or what many ancient cultures referred to as the underworld. Sub means under, and therefore we enter the corridors of our psyche which are below or under what we are consciously aware of. This is known as the shadow, the storage center where the trauma and subconscious habits loop until we enter this underworld and rewrite them. However, these are not the darkest demons along the path. These are more so an initiatory step before proceeding. It can get quite dark in this area depending on what kind of person you've chosen to be or how you've chosen to live your life. None of this process is to be forced, so if this part feels uncomfortable, then I recommend coming back up for air, so to speak, and returning to this practice after doing a little more self-reflection and acknowledgement of the shadow while in the conscious waking state. This stage of the path shows us the good in ourselves as well, but it shows the ugly just as much. The result is humility and self-honesty, eventually resulting in the holy grail of traits, grace. Step 5 involves curving forward around the solar plexus region. As a physical result, this activates digestion. Metaphorically, this causes us to fully digest the shadow initiation we went through in the previous step. Once again, we are down here with the energy of surrender from the first step, love and trust from the second step, light-heartedness from the third step, and complete self-honesty resulting from the humility of the fourth step. This digestion in physical terms is brought about through beneficial germination in the gut, and in occult embodiment this area is where the cerebrospinal fluid is refined and where the inner Christos is said to germinate. The solar plexus region is quite literally the solar sun of God within. This is the light at the end of the dark tunnel we went through in the fourth step. Step 4 was the ego death, and step 5 is the rebirth of a more refined ego. Step 6 curves us backwards around the sacral region of the navel. This is approximately the region of the sacral cranial pump, which is a hydraulic system that circulates the cerebrospinal fluid or inner Christos throughout the body. This raises the oil back upwards into the brain to complete the loop of ascension and descension. This area in Chinese mysticism is known as the Lower Dan Tian and was labeled as the Golden Stove. In certain Eastern traditions, the Holy Grail wasn't symbolized by a cup, it was symbolized by a cauldron or a stove. However, the cup shape does match this area of the body as well because the uterus or womb is in this general region and is shaped like a cup. The whole pelvic bowl is generally shaped like a cup as well. This is the internal allegory for the bloodline of Christ consciousness and Mary consciousness continuing. The achievement of this energy is not contingent upon physical gender, it depends on the energetic gender or balance of polarity within oneself. The cerebrospinal fluid only goes down to the S2 vertebrae level and not the bottom of the spine, so the current is completed in the sixth step where the sacral cranial pump loops it back upwards. Now we have a complete current. But just because a current is complete, doesn't mean it is grounded. This is where the seventh and final step comes in. Here we curve forward and land in the center where the perineum is located. The root chakra in the Kundalini system is often related to the base of the spine, where it ascends upwards from. However, the perineum is a different kind of root which vacuums energy from above downwards and out through the legs and the feet. The perineum supports the pelvic floor and has to do with helping us eliminate waste down and out. This is the cathode of the body. We'll get into the deeper meaning of the words cathode and cathedral in a bit, but for now we'll keep moving on with the seventh step. This perineum is the final demon, the final gatekeeper, and the ultimate guardian to the full embodiment. Asmodeus guards this ultimately deep crevice of our underworld. Though we could see demons as beings that are siphoning our energy, even this act of siphoning can be seen as discharging or grounding given it has the same energetic signature to it, that being the signature of release. See how the first step started with surrender and the last ends with release. They're essentially the same in meaning, so we've come full circle. When we release, or trust, or surrender to the divine will while in this area, Asmodeus takes off his scary mask, steps aside, and now our current becomes optimally grounded. Now we can magnetize the heavenly realms of above to the earthly realms of below. As the old saying goes, as above, so below. And from the perineum, we move in a straight line back up to the heart, where we return to our center. The heart is the integration point of all polarities. It is the balance point that takes the pre-existing activation of the ascending serpent and marries it with the descending energy of the dove. It is important to move back upwards to the heart in a straight line, due to the fact that continuing this loop in continuity would turn into fight or flight mode being turned back on, as seen in the chart regarding the figure on the right side of the chart. Moving up in a straight line to the heart after achieving the discharging current ensures we maintain the parasympathetic peace brought about by this process while entering the heart. Asmodeus is the final gatekeeper to completing the circuit. He is the guardian at the Church of Mary Magdalene in Rennes-les-Châteaux, France. A town known for Grail lore, to say the least. Let me draw your attention to the cipher revolving around this church which Asmodeus was guarding and its stained glass light phenomenon known as blue apples. It reads as follows. Shepherdess, no temptation that Poussin and Tenière hold the key, pack 681 by the cross, and this horse of God, I complete this guardian demon, at midday, blue apples. Asmodeus is traditionally known as the sinful demon of lust and materialism, and with that being said we can see that certain periods of abstaining from greed and sexual release can cause us to unmask Asmodeus to some degree. However, sexual abstinence isn't the ultimate path to unmasking the chief of our underworld. We must clear our discharging pathways in order for energy to flow through us instead of it getting dammed up, resulting in literal damnation. When we abstain from greed and lust and unmask Asmodeus, we refine our ability to materialize or manifest through sexual energy and physical means as well. Asmodeus, in earlier manifestations meant wrath, indicating the transmutation of wrath would cause this king of demons to be unmasked and transformed into grace. Our wrathful traits or anger is a blockage between us and the embodiment of the Holy Spirit. It is too much to cover in this video, but I'd encourage anyone listening to do some research on the etymology and phonetic roots of the root word asmo and the name Asmodeus. Dios or Dios often implies a ruler of sorts or a shining light, and this was the name given to the chief of demons who assisted in the construction of Solomon's temple. Solomon in one sense means soul of man. Thus, the temple of the soul of man, which was constructed by Hiram Abiff, or the archetype of the initiate. Rudolf Steiner has spoken certain words of Asmodeus, also known as Ahriman, and I feel those words are accurate, although they can be seen in a different context through the same description that still aligns with the points of this video along with the points Steiner and many others have made regarding the Lord of Demons. And I would once again like to emphasize that I am not encouraging demon worship or the attempt to conjure up beings from other realms, as I see that act as a step into the demiurge, where the demons will trick you or sway you away from the deeper mysteries that one isn't ready for. We aren't ready for certain truths to be revealed if we are summoning external entities to do our work for us, as that would imply we are still in the illusion of separation. The idea of Solomon conjuring demons is something we can figure to be a metaphor and not a literal practice. In a sense, there's no concept along the course of the pathway shown in this chart that needs to be actively engaged in. All that is needed is to follow the descending curved pathway down the body, feeling every step of the way with your mind. The path I previously described is not an end-all be-all approach to tapping into the descending counterbalance. In the realm of mental imagery and meditation, there is no ultimate approach or set of rules. This is more so a guideline, and though it is backed by anatomical facts and principles of ideal feng shui, there are perhaps ways that you can achieve this same result through your own method so long as you understand certain psychosomatic principles. Now to return to the topic of the cathode. A cathode brings energy down, like how a cathedral does. The root word cath means down, out, or release. This root word cath directly describes and correlates with the descending dove energy. In other words, we see the descending dove concept correlating with words that have the root word cath in them. A cathedral is a cathode. Catharsis is another word that displays this idea of purging or releasing. If we take this root word cath back to French Grail lore, there was a group called the Cathars who knew the arts of healing and the secrets of spiritual embodiment. We could figure they knew quite well of the descending dove energy, whether they called it that or not. Then we have the Catholic Church, which was originally supposed to have Mary Magdalene as the first figurehead instead of Peter being the first pope. Thus the Church went astray since its conception. The Roman emperors, who have corrupted the Catholic Church, have created a paradigm that acts as a subconscious mind virus to humanity, causing us to see heaven as a place upward, in the sky. Truly heaven is all around us, and here we are, on earth. This earth could be Eden, but we have to meet it there. Meeting Eden calls for us completing the circuit and finding our grace and humility, perhaps through the path of the descending dove. I do believe wholeheartedly that much of what the Catholic Church has coveted has to do with manuscripts based on embodiment techniques. Techniques on how to complete the circuit. They seem to have coveted this in plain sight, as the Black Madonna is another symbol of this descending energy. Religious superstition has taught that the concepts of blackness, darkness, and downwardness implies evil and leads to hell. The Roman papacy has controlled people with fear for centuries, telling them they will go to hell if they don't follow their dogmatic ways. The idea that there is a fiery place below our feet where we burn eternally has been enough to drive many people away from seeing descending energy as a potentially benevolent half of our being. But I must say, we do burn eternally, as our very soul is that of fire which never dies. You cannot use fire to burn something that runs hotter than the fire itself, but you can balance the fire with the cooling energy of the Holy Spirit in order to temper the fire, or soul, into a refined state of higher virtuosity. Passion is like the brain, it's a great servant but a terrible master. Such is the Kundalini energy. We thrive in refinement, though our ego strives more for amplification. The Catholic Church can covet the manuscripts, relics, and gold all they wish. We have eternal access to all knowledge, and our library is within. And for those who have not gone within, they too are generally good people. All will be redeemed. As far as the original hard copy records regarding the descending energy, it is my view that they are in the right hands. In the hands of those who excavated, both within themselves as a Gnostic order of warrior monks, and within the ground beneath the Temple of Jerusalem. The Internet and the general realm of metaphysical academia has become an echo chamber of ascension-based practice. And though I am not saying Kundalini is a bad practice, it's incomplete without its counterpart. Its counterpart will return to the masses, when the time is right. It will be at the same time that God's grace descends to earth as a dove. Truly, that grace has always been here, but in time, we will all grow to recognize its omnipresence and humble ourselves. Only then can we be truly conscious and embodied in the concept that we are one with the divine. It is one thing to know that all is one, but knowing it doesn't mean we live our lives according to it. Thus the scales of Marat, where the heart was weighed instead of the brain's capacity to know. If the heart was lighter than the feather, then one would pass through what was known as the duat, or the afterlife. It doesn't take a physical death to go through this process. It is an initiation that can take place in your earthly incarnation, resulting in a rebirth. There is an initial rebirth that comes from a spontaneous Kundalini awakening, but that is not the only rebirth we go through. The Kundalini awakening is simply the initial initiation, or the first step. To emphasize the harmony between polarity, I'll say once more, the serpent and the dove are not in competition. It is only our misunderstanding of creation that puts two polarities to war in such a way. We've grown to think that we must choose one or the other when there are two opposites. But why not find a way to make both harmonize? Imagine building a house and trying to decide whether you're going to use hammers or nails. Deciding whether you need to choose between using drills or screws. You would get nowhere fast. Both are required. Choosing both polarities isn't inherently a sign that we lack conviction. It can be a sign of wisdom. Paradox is when opposites harmonize. Contradiction is when opposites clash. It is up to us whether polarity harmonizes or clashes in our experience. Fear is the only thing that keeps us from choosing harmony, and though fear has its time and place for sheer survival, it is not the optimal state of mind to constantly live in. There is no evil in the astral realms. There is only that which seems like evil due to our own free will to perceive duality. Reptilians are projections of our reptilian brainstem. Demons are projections of our subconscious mind. The devil is a projection of our most earthly nature. And Satan, or Chronos, is a projection of the bondage we feel from existing in space and time. None of the latter are describing literal or external beings that only intend to harm us. Did you know there is a numerical correlation between angels and demons? This is the number 72. There is another video on this channel where I go into the number 72 and its correlations more in depth, but for now I'll state the following. There were 72 angels along Jacob's ladder according to Kabbalistic mysticism, correlating with the 72 names of God, and Solomon was said to summon 72 demons to help build the temple of God on earth. So here we see 72 angels and 72 demons. Here we see 72 ascending and 72 descending. Together we get the divine number 144, which is found in many schools of thought in many variations, but for the sake of not diverting from the topic, I'll say that the number 144 essentially means light. 72 angels, or angles of light ascending, and 72 fallen angles of light descending, to create a circuit of 144. When the circuit is crucified, or multiplied 1,000-fold, we get the number 144,000, most popularly recognized from the Book of Revelations. This concept also plays out in the chakra system when applying it to the amount of lotus petals each chakra is said to have. Perhaps it could be speculated that when we fully integrate and embody the workings of the descending energy, we will have the knowledge and the ability to precipitate energy from the spiritual plane into the physical plane, instantaneously, at will. The constituents of all forms of matter are found in the space all around us, which is equally within us. In more modern times, demons are tampered with in the misconception that they will bring the one who makes a deal with them some grand form of material wealth. This approach is that of working at a convenience store one day and applying to be a lion tamer the next, with no previous experience or understanding. This could only yield poor results, because once again, calling upon something external to correct our lives can only be done from the illusion of division and will therefore bring about a result that echoes our very divisive mindset back to us, perhaps in the form of a demon keeping us away from obtaining something we aren't truly ready for. It's quite interesting how this video turns from doves into demons, then back into doves. We can gather from this that there is a mixture of light and dark in everything, and that light and dark aren't inherently good or bad. Too much light can blind us and leave us in a starry-eyed state of delusion. And too much darkness can blind us by default. A lack of light leaves us void of life. A lack of darkness leaves us void of self-reflection. The thing about the spirit is that it remains forever unscathed. It cannot be tainted or damaged like our soul can. The spirit is the union among all, the omnipresent and omnipotent source, which the soul or light image emerges from. Therefore, there is no such thing as spiritual activation in this sense. The spirit is always as active as it can be. It's just a matter of becoming conscious and embodying the spirit that makes us perceive it as being more active than before. It is always within us and is never dormant. The only thing dormant is our potential unawareness to the fact that it has always been within us. Whether it be Moses raising the serpent up the staff, or Noah sending the dove to find new land, we see these two polar opposite yet complementary figures in various schools of thought, all throughout the world. So I propose that there is something here. A key. The missing half of our spiritual embodiment process. The potential reason why the heavenly state of being that comes from a spiritual awakening tends to fizzle out over time, leaving many with a quest for more knowledge and a thirst to return to that heavenly state we were once in. Though life's demands alone can make it quite challenging to maintain such a state, there is a way to maintain this state. If the stresses of life are able to flow through us, or down and out, instead of getting stuck in us, then we can perhaps maintain that heavenly state of being. After all, that would be akin to walking around in Eden once more. We fell from this state when Adam and Eve, or atomic evolution, ate from the tree of knowledge, or what we can see as choosing the sympathetic nervous system to become the dominant operating system. The parasympathetic nervous system is the fight or flight mode as mentioned. It was only fear itself that brought us to this point where war, disease, and illusion runs rampant. Eden never left us. We left Eden, and it has always been ready for our return. Perhaps the next story will be the dove encouraging us to eat the fruit from the tree of life, resulting in us reactivating the light body and transcending the bondage of density, the density that only derived from our own fear. The ancestral trauma from the fall echoed into what we now know as the human experience. It compounded into a world of disharmony, but even the fruition of such fear was part of a divine plan. Fear is a catalyst for evolution as well, just a far less comfortable one. It stirs the pot up quite well. However, it can only do so much until its counterpart has its turn. Our liberation is often found on the other side of our deepest fears. The most profound mysteries are often found guarded by the scariest demons. And the truth is often found in the center of polarity, the heart of mankind. So may our hearts be lighter than the feather as we continue along our path, and if the weight of the world becomes painful, just remember what it takes for lumps of coal to turn into diamond. Pressure offers us a beautiful opportunity. The opportunity to embody grace, for power alone will only consume itself. So let us be wise as serpents, and innocent as doves. And now to leave off with a manual. Let us excavate. Dig deep down beneath your temple. There you will find a demon. Refrain from judging this demon, and it will take its mask off and reveal itself as your guardian angel. Let this guardian angel guide you to the treasure buried in the bowels of your underworld. Open the chest, and there you will find your own heart, purified by the grace of the dove. Now your heart remembers it is one with the earth, as Eden welcomes you back home.